Well, do you think that the administration has accepted the notion that there must be some preconditions on both sides?
No, the American administration has said there ought not be any preconditions, but that the sides need to understand that when they get to negotiations, borders, Jerusalem, all of the issues will be on the table. The Israeli position has essentially been not to identify those issues that would be discussed. The American administration has, in fact, the president has done it publicly. He did it, in effect, in Cairo. He did it at the United Nations, has identified those issues which need to be determined and discussed.
So the administration never asked Israel for a freeze across the board, West Bank, East Jerusalem, on every and all kind of settlement activity?
Well, no, of course.
In advance of the negotiations?
The administration, clearly, it's been quite public, has made its view quite well known in terms of its request. It's arguing for a settlement freeze in return for significant steps by the Palestinians and the Arab world to begin their normalization efforts with Israel. Those normalization efforts, unfortunately, were not forthcoming by the Arab world, and all of the parties did not fulfill the president's request. But it was not done in the context of conditions or preconditions for negotiation. It was done in the context of measures to develop trust to begin negotiations. The president, of course, at the United Nations agreed with Prime Minister Netanyahu that there would be, in fact, no preconditions for negotiations. And, in fact, the American administration has praised Prime Minister Netanyahu for his settlement restraint efforts in the last several weeks. And Secretary Clinton, when she was in Israel, talked about the unprecedented nature of what the Israeli government is seeking to do. So these are the facts as to where we stand now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope your interpretation is exactly right, because if there are preconditions, it's going to be pretty hard to meet them before the negotiations actually begin. And it at least seemed to me that there was a confusion on that point, whether or not these were preconditions.
I think the president and the secretary and Mr. Mitchell have been quite clear in terms of no preconditions, that the goal is to get to meaningful negotiations between the parties.
Why do you think that the situation is ripe for success now as compared to the last, decade and more? What's changed? What's changing to give us a shot at peace in the Middle East now?
Well, by necessity. I believe the responsible leaders in Israel, as well as in the Palestinian areas, unlike Hamas, and in the Arab world, recognize that the status quo is unsustainable. Israel has fought 2 wars in the very recent past, and we're trying to avoid the need to repeat that. There is an opportunity with the beginning of the Obama administration, with the new administration in Israel, as well as, I think, a realization in the Arab world that Israel's here to stay, thank goodness, that they are, in fact, a nation, that there will be no right of return, for instance, that will diminish the Jewish character of the State of Israel. These are things that I believe have, in essence, been understood, and it's time now to allow the Palestinian people to realize their own rightful national aspirations, but to do so in a manner in which the security of Israel is, in fact, secured, and that we create a Palestinian entity that is viable, both economically and politically.
Now,
I apologize. They've called the vote, and I think it's down to about 3 minutes. So I'm going to run and then come right back, okay?
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Was it 4 minutes? No. Sorry. Yeah.
Advance, I think. I was talking to very good-looking women, so I lost my whole train of thought. I know that's very un-PC, but forgive me. We were on the subject of actually how you move the negotiations along, and your feeling about the administration position. Maybe we can pick up from there. I assume they can splice all this and just continue the interview as if we had never taken the break. Is that correct on your end?
I believe so. Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, let's assume that's the case. What steps do you think you're going to take with your organization, either with the center alone or with other groups, to try to reinforce the administration's position? Who are you going to talk to? What arguments are you going to make that they haven't heard before?
It's not a question of making arguments that haven't been made before. The question is working with the principles and applying sets of incentives in a fashion which will be more successful than they have been in the past. In terms of my own involvement, I will always start with the American government, with the American administration, and will work in concert with the American administration. But part and parcel to that, we'll be working very closely and carefully with the Israeli administration, as well as the leadership in the Arab countries, in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And I also believe that Turkey, of course, plays a very instrumental role. The Prime Minister Erdogan, was in Washington this week, and it may be that Turkey has an opportunity to again play a mediating role between Israel and Syria. Prime Minister Netanyahu has expressed some skepticism in that regard as a result of the Prime Minister's statements and so forth of late. But I hope that we can get to a point where Turkey again, in fact, can play an instrumental role, because they are such a prominent and powerful regional ally of the United States.
Now, I know from your past statements, you're well aware of the difficulty of negotiating with the Palestinians, given the weakness of the PLO, given the weakness of their government. What is your thinking on what your organization, the United States, can do to make them a more viable negotiating partner?
Well, I think there are a number of things that can be done that will enhance not particular individuals within the Palestinian Authority, although I think that should be one of our goals, but to enhance all of those Palestinians who seek a negotiated settlement with Israel. And take a look, as I said earlier, to Prime Minister Fayyad's institution-building plan within the Palestinian society. You know, arguably one of the most damning aspects of Yasser Arafat, from my perspective, is that he never presented a vision. He never made a speech about what the Palestinian state that he, in theory, sought would look like. How is he going to build his hospitals, build his roads, his educational system, his economy, his infrastructure? Well, that's what Prime Minister Fayyad is seeking to do. I think the United States and others, the Arab world, Europe, should get behind that kind of an effort in a big way.